The rain came down in a steady drizzle, coating the cracked pavement of Blackridge Industrial Park in a thin layer of grime and filth. The place had been abandoned for years, long enough for rust to eat away at steel beams and for nature to reclaim what was once a thriving manufacturing district. Factories that once roared with life now stood silent, their broken windows staring like dead eyes into the night. Nathan Carter pulled his truck to a stop outside the largest of these structures, Ashford Chemical Plant. The old factory loomed over him, its smokestacks reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers. He killed the engine and let out a slow breath. His boss at the county records office had assigned him to catalog the remaining property, an easy enough job, on paper. In reality, it meant stepping foot into a place that had a reputation for being cursed. "Damn place gives me the creeps," he muttered, grabbing his flashlight and a clipboard before stepping out into the cold night air. His boots crunched against the wet gravel as he approached the entrance. The heavy metal door was slightly ajar, hanging off its hinges, swaying ever so slightly with the wind. Inside, the darkness was thick and oppressive. The beam of his flashlight cut through the gloom, revealing corroded machinery, overturned barrels and graffiti-covered walls. The air smelled of mildew and something else, something faint but unmistakably rancid. Nathan clicked his tongue. "All right, let's get this over with." He moved cautiously, noting structural damage, making quick sketches of the building's layout. The deeper he went, the heavier the air seemed, thick with a presence he couldn't quite explain. He dismissed it as nerves. Places like this always carried a strange energy, a residual echo of their past. Then he heard it. A faint scraping sound. He froze. The sound came from deeper inside the factory, somewhere beyond the rusted conveyor belts. Nathan swallowed hard, gripping his flashlight like a weapon. Probably just a rat. Maybe a piece of metal shifting in the wind. He took another step forward. Then another. The scraping turned into something else. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Nathan's breath hitched as he swung the flashlight toward the sound. The beam landed on a corridor leading to the lower levels, its walls coated in something dark, something wet. His heart pounded in his chest. And then he saw it, a figure standing just at the edge of the light. Tall. Motionless. Watching him. Nathan stumbled back, his pulse roaring in his ears. His flashlight flickered, and in that split second of darkness the sound came again, closer this time. He turned and ran. The air around him felt heavier, the stench of decay growing stronger. His boots skidded on the slick floor as he reached the exit, slamming into the metal door with enough force to make it groan. He shoved it open and stumbled outside, gasping for air. The night was silent again, the only sound his ragged breathing. He turned back toward the factory, expecting to see movement in the shadows. But there was nothing. Just the hollow, blackened windows staring back at him. Nathan didn't wait around. He scrambled back into his truck, locked the doors and peeled out of the lot, gravel spraying beneath his tires. He didn't know what he had seen. But he knew without a doubt he wasn't alone in that factory. And someone, had been waiting for him. Nathan barely slept that night. His mind replayed the image of the figure standing in the factory, just beyond the reach of his flashlight. He told himself it was just a trick of the light, his overactive imagination conjuring horrors out of rust and shadows. But deep down he knew better. The next morning his boss, Mr. Rourke, called him into the office. "You didn't finish the survey," Rourke said, frowning over his glasses. "I need that report, Carter." Nathan hesitated. "There's something off about that place. Maybe we should send a crew in there instead of—" "We don't have the budget for a crew," Rourke interrupted. "Get it done today." Nathan swallowed his protests. He knew arguing wouldn't help. Hours later, he found himself standing at the gates of Ashford Chemical again, the morning sun doing little to ease his nerves. With a deep breath, he stepped inside once more. The factory felt different in daylight, but not less eerie. The corridors seemed to stretch farther than he remembered, and the shadows clung stubbornly to the corners. He made his way deeper, past the rusted machinery and the graffiti-covered walls, toward the lower levels where he had seen the figure. As he descended the stairwell, a thick, acrid stench filled his nose. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of rot and something chemical. At the bottom, he found a set of reinforced metal doors partially open. The scrape marks on the floor suggested they had been forced apart recently. His heart pounded as he stepped inside. The room beyond was vast and cavernous, filled with rusted vats and strange, corroded pipes running along the walls. But what caught Nathan's attention was the floor. Dried streaks of something dark led toward a large drain in the center of the room. Then he saw the symbols. painted across the walls in what looked like the same dark substance. The markings were unfamiliar, jagged, twisting shapes that made his skin crawl just looking at them. A sudden noise made him whip around. A whisper. Faint. Right behind him. Nathan spun, his flashlight trembling in his grip. The air grew thick with an unnatural chill, his breath misting in front of him. His instincts screamed at him to run, but something in the darkness was keeping him there, watching. Then, from the depths of the factory, something moved. A shape, dragging itself from the shadows. Nathan's breath hitched as the shape in the shadows slithered forward. His flashlight flickered again, the weak beam barely illuminating the thing creeping toward him. It wasn't walking, it was dragging itself, its limbs moving in jerky, unnatural motions as if controlled by invisible strings. The symbols on the wall seemed to pulse, the dark substance gleaming wetly under the dim light. A deep, guttural whisper echoed through the cavernous space, curling around him like a noose tightening around his throat. Run. The thought slammed into his brain like a warning bell, but his body refused to move. He was rooted to the spot, frozen in sheer terror. Then the figure stopped. Nathan's heart pounded as he took a slow step backward, his foot slipping slightly on the damp floor. The figure's head twitched toward him, and though its face was obscured by shadows, Nathan could feel its gaze burning into him. The thing let out a sound, a wet, gurgling rasp. And then, with inhuman speed, it lunged. Nathan barely had time to react. He threw himself backward, landing hard on the cold floor. The flashlight slipped from his grasp, its beam spinning wildly across the room, casting erratic shadows. The creature shrieked, a sound like nails on glass, and then stopped abruptly, retreating just beyond the reach of the light. It was avoiding the light. Nathan scrambled for the flashlight, his fingers barely brushing against it when another sound filled the room. Footsteps. More than one set. From the corridor behind him, more figures emerged, their bodies unnaturally thin, their movements stiff and fragmented. Their eyes, if they had any, were voids of shifting darkness, absorbing the weak glow of his flashlight. Nathan's pulse pounded in his ears as he grabbed the flashlight and swung the beam wildly. The creatures flinched back but didn't retreat entirely. They were waiting. For what? Then he felt it, a presence behind him, cold and oppressive. The breath on the back of his neck sent a primal wave of fear through him. He didn't turn around. He ran. He bolted through the darkened corridor, the flashlight bouncing wildly in his grip. The things screeched behind him, their footsteps hammering against the floor. He could hear them closing in, their rasping breaths filling the air. Nathan's shoulder slammed into a rusted door, and for a horrifying second, it didn't budge. Then, with a groan of protesting metal, it gave way, and he stumbled into a long, narrow passage lined with rusted pipes. Ahead, a sliver of daylight peeked through a half-collapsed doorway. His salvation. He sprinted, lungs burning, boots slipping on the damp concrete. The creatures were gaining, their shrieks turning into maddening whispers that slithered into his ears, burrowing into his thoughts. He wasn't going to make it. A cold, skeletal hand brushed against the back of his jacket, and instinct took over. Nathan spun, swinging the flashlight like a club. The beam struck one of the creatures full in the face. It screamed, a soul-piercing wail that rattled his teeth, before disintegrating into a swirling mass of black mist that dispersed into the air. What? They couldn't withstand it. Fueled by desperation, Nathan turned and sprinted the last few feet, throwing himself through the broken doorway and into the blinding sunlight. He hit the gravel outside hard, rolling onto his back, gasping for breath. Silence. He forced himself to sit up, heart slamming against his ribs. The entrance to the factory yawned before him like a gaping wound, but nothing emerged. Nathan clutched his flashlight, his fingers aching from how hard he was gripping it. He stared at the factory, at the hollow, blackened windows watching him. He had escaped. But deep down he knew this wasn't over. Something had been waiting for him in that factory. And now it knew his name. Nathan didn't go to work the next day. He barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes he saw those creatures, those hollow ones, lurking just beyond his reach. He kept the flashlight clutched in his hands, its beam tracing the shadows in his small apartment, ensuring he was alone. But he knew he wasn't. The symbols from the factory burned in his mind, seared into his thoughts like scars. He needed answers. He needed to know what he had stumbled upon. His trembling hands fumbled for his phone. He scrolled through articles about Ashford Chemical, sifting through the reports of its closure, the rumors of illegal experiments, and the hushed whispers of disappearances linked to the plant. But there was something else, an old police report buried deep within a conspiracy forum. A man named Daniel Holloway had gone missing inside the plant 2 decades ago. His last words, spoken in a frantic 911 call, sent a chill down Nathan's spine. They're still here. In the dark. Watching. Waiting. Nathan's stomach twisted. The factory wasn't just abandoned. It was a tomb. A sharp knock at his door made him jump. His breath caught in his throat as he approached, gripping the flashlight tighter. He hesitated before peering through the peephole. A man stood outside. Tall, gaunt, with sunken eyes that bore into the door as if he knew Nathan was watching. Nathan's fingers hovered over the lock. He wasn't sure why, but every nerve in his body screamed not to open it. Then the man spoke, his voice a rasping whisper. "They know you, Nathan. And they don't let go." The lights in Nathan's apartment flickered. And from the darkness behind him, something moved. Nathan spun around, his heart hammering. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, shifting and twisting like living things. A cold dread washed over him as the air grew thick, pressing in from all sides. His phone vibrated in his pocket. Hands trembling, he pulled it out. A new message flashed across the screen from an unknown number. "Go back." His blood ran cold. Nathan turned back toward the door, but the man was gone. The hallway outside was empty, eerily silent. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of unseen eyes upon him. He didn't want to return to Ashford Chemical. But something told him he had no choice. Nathan sat in his truck outside Ashford Chemical, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. The message on his phone burned in his mind. Go back. He didn't know who had sent it. He didn't want to know. But the sinking feeling in his gut told him that whoever, or whatever, it was, they were right. If he didn't return, the hollow ones would come for him. He had seen them, had felt their gaze, and now he belonged to them. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the abandoned factory. He took a deep breath, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped out. The crunch of gravel beneath his boots felt deafening in the suffocating silence. The air was thick, charged, as if the place itself was holding its breath. With hesitant steps he entered the plant. The darkness swallowed him whole. The stench of decay was stronger now, as if the walls had been absorbing it for years. The symbols on the wall seemed to pulse again, but this time Nathan felt something else. A pull, a whisper at the edges of his consciousness, luring him deeper. He followed it. The stairwell leading to the lower levels yawned before him. As he descended, his breath came in short gasps. The deeper he went, the colder it became, until he could see his breath misting in the air. Then he heard it. Whispers. Dozens of them. Hissing, murmuring, overlapping. Nathan turned the corner into the cavernous chamber where he had first seen the hollow ones. The rusted vats loomed around him, their surfaces slick with moisture. The drain in the center of the room gaped open like a hungry mouth. And the symbols? They were glowing. A deep vibration thrummed through the walls, through the floor, through his bones. The whispers grew louder, forming words that clawed at his mind. You cannot leave. The shadows in the room began to shift, coalescing into forms. The hollow ones emerged, their thin, warped bodies stretching unnaturally, their eyeless faces turning toward him. The air grew thick with their presence, pressing against his chest, suffocating him. Nathan's flashlight flickered. He had one chance. He lunged forward, aiming the beam at the nearest creature. It shrieked, its body convulsing before dissolving into black mist. He turned, sweeping the light across the room, forcing the creatures back. But there were too many. Then a voice. Soft. Familiar. Nathan. His heart nearly stopped. At the far end of the chamber stood a figure, a man barely visible through the shifting darkness. Nathan's breath caught as recognition slammed into him. Daniel Holloway. The missing man from 20 years ago. He looked unchanged. His face was pale, his eyes hollow, but he was there. And he was watching Nathan with an expression that sent chills through his spine. You shouldn't have come back, Daniel whispered. Nathan swallowed hard. I didn't have a choice. Daniel's gaze flickered to the walls, to the symbols pulsing with a sickly light. They're waking up. They need a tether. A new one. Nathan took a shaky step back. A tether? Daniel's face twisted with something like sorrow. I was the last one. He raised a trembling hand, revealing his forearm. The symbols were carved into his flesh, glowing the same eerie hue as those on the walls. They need someone to take my place. Nathan's stomach dropped. He understood now. The factory wasn't just haunted, it was a prison. And Daniel had been its unwilling warden. The hollow ones weren't just creatures. They were prisoners. And they needed a keeper. A violent wind howled through the chamber, and the symbols flared, bathing everything in an unholy glow. The hollow ones surged forward, their whispers turning into screams. Nathan's instincts screamed at him to run, but Daniel shook his head. You can't escape. Not unless... He hesitated, then clenched his jaw. Not unless we seal it. For good. Nathan met his gaze. How? Daniel's voice was tight. You know how. Nathan looked down at the flashlight in his shaking hands. The only thing that kept the creatures at bay. The only thing keeping him alive. But if he turned it off, the creatures would consume Daniel instead. His breath caught. I can't. Daniel gave him a sad smile. You can. You must. The hollow ones screeched, their forms stretching toward Nathan, barely held back by the waning light. The symbols pulsed violently now, their energy surging, seeking. Nathan squeezed his eyes shut. Then with a shaky breath he flicked off the flashlight. Darkness swallowed the room. The last thing he heard was Daniel whispering, "Thank you." And then, silence. Nathan woke up outside the factory. The first rays of dawn were creeping over the horizon, casting the building in a pale, golden light. He was lying on the ground, his body aching, his mind hazy. He sat up slowly, glancing back at the entrance. The doorway was gone. The whole lower level, the stairwell, the corridors, everything had vanished as if it had never existed. Nathan let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. The weight in his chest had lifted. The oppressive presence was gone. It was over. He staggered to his feet, staring at the factory one last time. The windows were still hollow, still empty. But for the first time they weren't watching him. Nathan turned, got into his truck, and drove away without looking back. And in the rising sun, Ashford Chemical stood silent once more. This story is purely a work of fiction and is not real.